Welcome to the Women's MTB Network podcast. My name is Mia, and I'm your host. This is the show where we celebrate the women of mountain biking, riders, racers, mechanics, industry leaders, and community builders. We dive into stories, challenges, and triumphs, shaping women's mountain biking, breaking down barriers, and making sure women are seen and heard on the trails and beyond. Whether you're a seasoned shredder or just getting started, this is your space to connect, learn, and get stoked on all things mountain bike. We're stoked to have you. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Women's MTB Network podcast. As you know, my name is Mia, and today we have an incredibly exciting guest on the channel. Someone who's been helping riders level up their skill and gain confidence, and someone who truly enjoys mountain biking to the fullest. Joining us today is Roxy, or Coach Roxy, as I like to call her. She's a highly respected mountain bike coach known for her dynamic approach to skills training, mindset coaching, and making technical riding more approachable for folks. So whether you're just starting out or looking to refine your skills, your technique, Roxy really does have a wealth of knowledge that she could share with us. So in this episode, we're going to dive into everything from overcoming fear on the bike to mastering technical skills, how to structure your training and real progress. Plus, we'll get Roxy's take on the biggest mistakes riders make and how to fix them. So grab a coffee, hop on the trainer, or kick back and get ready to be inspired. Let's dive right into this. Roxy, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited because I think it's great what you're doing. And I've been following you for a long time. And it's so inspiring. And it's such an important thing that you do. So I'm just super excited that you chose me to be here today.
I mean, it's a no-brainer. I've been fangirling over you for years, like for real. I've been following your stuff. And one of the biggest videos that I love, you have so many amazing videos. And for folks listening, I'm going to have all of Roxy's information in the show notes and YouTube, like in the description. So be sure to check that out. But one of the best videos I love of yours is when you're in Sedona and you did Highline, because Highline to me is like one of the toughest it's one of the best single track in Sedona, I think, but it's also one of the toughest trails to conquer in Sedona. There's so much and you have this really detailed video. I think it's almost 40 minutes long. And I've watched that so many times because you take the time to show people alternate lines and teach them how and guide them how to do that line, which I think is so cool because without you, I would have seriously been very injured doing that. So with that said, take us a little bit, let's go back a little bit. And can you share with us your background in mountain biking? Like, how did you get into mountain biking?
Yeah. Well, first off, it's kind of funny. I want to get back to you on that Highline video because it's always so funny, like when I'm doing the videos and then I never know who actually watches them because you get so little interaction and then it's so interesting for me to hear these stories. I'm like, yay, there are actually people out there watching. It's so funny. And it is really rewarding. So thank you first of all for that. And okay, my background. So I started mountain biking. I actually just released a video a few days ago where I shared like the true and the really, I would say, in a way sad, but honest story of how I got into mountain biking and why I got into mountain biking. So you should definitely link that one below.
Yes, we're going to link everything up here for YouTubers.
But it all boils down to that I wanted to have a sport where I was really active. Like I back then, I just wanted to burn a lot of calories. That was the main goal I had. And so I got into mountain biking and I had a few girlfriends who mountain bike and we were in this was in Germany. So my background is, which in case you're wondering, because my accent, I grew up in Cyprus on the Turkish side of Cyprus, but I went to an American high school. So I have this weird mixture. My mom's German, but I went to a Turkish school. So lots of languages in there.
Wow. So, what an amazing culture. You get culture from all over the place. Okay. Sorry. We'll dive into that. Keep going.
And I started mountain biking, and then we were in this bike club in Germany, and we had skills courses there with the young, super cool guys there, and they tried to teach us stuff, and we were like 3 girls, and the rest were men, and they said stuff that just did not work for me, like not at all. I was tiny, I was super skinny back then, because, well, as I said, I go more into that in that video, but I was super, super petite, and I am tiny. So I'm 5'1", which is 158,
Yeah.
and with about 40 kilograms back then, which is only about 80 pounds. I was
Very,
very,
very
yeah, I was
thin.
very
Yes.
underweight back then. And the things they said, they just did not work. So I got super frustrated. And I
Mm,
was like, this cannot be mountain biking. This is not fun because it looks so easy when they do it. So why doesn't it work for me? And then I started crashing a lot as well. And that's when I
okay.
started looking into why does this happen and how can I prevent it? And that's why
Mm-hmm.
I really wanted to learn how to coach myself, basically. And that's how I got into both the fear and the mindset part and also the coaching part. And that's how I really started to explore, why is it harder for us women? Is it really harder for us women? How can we overcome these challenges, and how can we work with the fear instead of pushing the fear away? So that's how I got into what I do and why I do what I do.
And you're so good. Excuse me. And you're so good at what you do. Like, honestly, you have a way, I tend to think of teachers as really important people in the world, but it's difficult to be a good teacher. It's very difficult to be a good teacher. And you break it down so freaking easy. And that's like back to the Highline video, right? Like, if you're there, and for those of you who know of Sedona, Arizona, Highline is a double black trail. And it's one of the three toughest trails I think you could do. At one point, I think people label it extreme. Either way, there's a lot of steep technical terrain, off camber sections. Like, it's just insane. That trail is insane, both climbing and descending, by the way. It's not just like that descending, it's like that climbing. um so yeah, your videos and the way you break it down is very digestible. It's very easy to understand, and I absolutely, like, I'm a huge fan, especially on Instagram. Like, all the videos you share, I'm like, save, save, save. Like, I need to do this, need to do this, need to do this. So with that though, you have helped a bunch of riders on and off the trail, myself included. I will attest to that. So how have you developed and evolved your training over the years to kind of fit the trend, right? The mountain
Mm-hmm.
biking trend that's happening. Talk to us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Well, the first thing I did is I took a bunch of certifications, and I think
Mm,
that is basically the biggest problem in the coaching industry. That now that I've been training other coaches for a few years, I think the biggest problem, and that's actually the biggest mistake holding back most coaches from evolving, is they take one or two certifications and that's it. And then they think, that's it, I'm done learning. And that's the first thing that I did. I didn't just take them, I keep taking them. So every year I keep taking one or two new certifications
awesome.
in the mountain bike world, but also outside of it. So
Right.
nowadays, with online learning, there's so much available. So I keep taking certifications and courses, for example, learning how to learn in neuroscience, in peer coaching, in psychology. So I try to just grow or go into my discomfort zone every year to keep growing myself. And I think
Wow.
that's what really shines through, because um, I don't just take what's there and regurgitate it, but I
Hmm.
always want to understand more and more and more. And if there's something
Yeah.
that doesn't make sense, I'll be like, why doesn't this make sense? And how can I make it easier for myself? And of course, also for my viewers to understand. And that's how I started. That's the first thing, like the never stop learning mindset, which is hard for myself. Of course, it's challenging because it really goes into that primal fear of never being good enough, and then always it can go in a negative spiral, but I try to leverage it in a positive way. And the
Yeah.
other thing is that I always ask why. That's why
Yes.
a lot of people hate me, because they're like, why does she always ask why? What is it about this girl? And I've had so many problems like taking certifications, because the people giving the certifications, they thought I was questioning them, but actually I really wanted to understand why.
Yeah.
And that's a thing that I never stop at the first answer I get. I will always ask why again and one more time. And then I will say, okay, let me think over this. And then, does this really make sense for me? And that's when I
Right.
started adapting there's so many tip traps out there, and there's so much generic advice out there. And I started adapting that to different types of people. And then when I
Yeah.
started, I think about, I mean, I've been coaching now for 15 years, but I started coaching like every day about 10 years ago. And then I
Hmm.
started every night sitting down and writing down, okay, what went well today? Where could I really help? Where did it click for my client? And where didn't it? So I reflected on it every night. And then I said, okay, look, I had 8 people in my clinic. One was, for example, overweight and really short. Another one was like 2 meters tall. I think that's six something, really
Yeah.
tall,
Let's just
and
say
super
6 foot.
skinny. Yeah, exactly. And it worked for them, but not for her. What can I change? And that's when I started really looking into, again, the why, and then adapting it for the person right there in front of me. And when I started working with a lot of riders aged 70 plus, aged 80 plus, I noticed that all the generic advice out there, it doesn't work for them. They don't have the quick strength, they don't have the flexibility. Of course, they have fears because they can get hurt. And that's when I started adapting it to not only the geometry of the bike, but the geometry of the rider, the age of the rider, the background of the rider,
Yes.
and started looking into, and of course, that opens a whole other new dimension for me as well. I was like, oh God, now I have to learn about anatomy. Now I have to. So that's when I started working with physiotherapists, asking them the stupidest questions, like, why would you ask that? It's like, yeah, because I noticed that, blah, blah, blah. And I started looking into small details that no one else cared about. But I noticed that these details, they make a huge difference. And when I then started working with super advanced riders, like 4 or 5 years ago, a lady I worked with for the Olympics, for example, and I noticed, okay, now it's like even smaller details that have the huge consequences.
Yes.
So, and that's the beauty about this job, that you can keep learning. But also, I think it's the danger because a lot of people think, I'm a good rider, I want to become a coach. But there's
Yes.
just so much more to coaching than just being a good rider.
100%. That you're a true teacher. You're a lifelong learner. That in my opinion is what makes someone really great at not only being a teacher but their job, right? Thinking about helping that individual to the next level and learning it. Like I would have never thought about that. Like for sure it's a one template, right? One size fits all. This is how you teach someone, but every single person is different 100%. Like, and I'm also fascinated by the fact that you said you're teaching 70-year-olds on bike. Like that's incredible. That's so freaking incredible.
I have so
How
many over 70 riders.
really?
Like my oldest client is 84. He's been riding for
Holy
4 years
cow.
and he is amazing. He rides better than like most 30-year-olds I know because he put in the work. In 4 years, he's been practicing like 3 to 4 times a week. I work with him remotely most of the time and it's incredible. And I have a lot of riders like him, and women and men, that are mostly aged 60 plus. And that's where I noticed, okay, this is something that is just so inspiring for myself because I can learn from them, they can learn from me, and I'm giving them a new purpose aging. Many of them were like, oh no, I can't do mountain biking, it's dangerous. But it doesn't have to
Yeah,
be. If you have the right
exactly.
approach and if you really find something that is step by step and works for you and really works with the limitations of your body and works with them and not against them, you can evolve at any age.
100%. I had this conversation with someone a couple of days ago. It was for a pitch for something, and she's like, "Oh, I'm familiar with what you do. I used to mountain bike." And I was like, "Wait, why?" And she's young. I think she's not even 30, maybe 29, 30 at most. And she goes, "Well, I had a really bad crash and I went over the bars and it scared me." And I'm fair enough. Like that's happened to me. It's not a good feeling at all. And I said, "But do you still like getting on the bike?" She's like, "Yeah, but I've just been really scared." And I said, "Okay, we're going to help you because I don't like hearing that because if you have a passion for something, you should want to do it, right?" And so I was telling her it's not necessarily you. It could be, I mean, yes, it's a lack of skill on some people's parts, and that happens to me all the time. But personally, it happens to me, and I have to stop and be like, "Oh, maybe I wasn't doing that correctly, and that's why I crashed." So I was telling her that too, and she lives in the other part of the country, but I've been trying to connect her with a coach out there to get her skill up. And she has this vision of mountain biking that it's all about speed and downhill and jumps, and I'm like, "No, that's a tiny little fraction of mountain biking."
Yeah,
Mountain
absolutely.
biking is about you having fun. And she even went on to say, well, I don't consider myself a mountain biker. And I'm like, well, what does that mean to you? You don't have to be a professional to consider yourself a mountain biker. People get caught up in that identity, right? Of like, oh, I need to do this to be a mountain biker. And I'm like, no, do you own a bike? Do you have a helmet? Do you have fun on the trails? Then you're a mountain biker. You know, that's all that
Exactly.
matters. So in that, what do you think makes a great mountain biker beyond just the skill level?
Well, as you said, it always comes back to how you define mountain biking. And that's also something that I just talked about in that recent video. That
Yeah.
mountain biking, I think, as you said, we have this misconception of mountain biking being this super dangerous, stunty sport. And it depends on what mountain biking is for that specific person. However, I think if let's just define mountain biking as someone who wants to ride technical trails, like natural technical trails. If if that's the way you define mountain biking, then a great mountain biker, in my opinion and in my experience working with so many riders, is someone who can really control their bike at all times. As in,
Ooh.
that they are riding the bike and not the bike is riding them. And it sounds kind of like, well, duh, common sense, but common sense is not common practice. Like when I'm out there,
Exactly.
like standing next to a trail, literally only about like a maximum 20% actually control their bike. Most of people are
Wow.
actually going on a ride like the bike is taking them on a ride,
Yeah.
and they don't even feel it. And I think that is like the one of the biggest problems generally in mountain biking is that our mountain bikes are so good. So most people will just hop on a bike, they will ride a blue trail, everything works, and they'll take the next one and the harder one, and they'll be on intermediate trails in a few days, and then they crash because of course they need skills for that. But in
Yes.
the beginning, if you don't have that feeling and if you're just riding, you won't really notice in how much like the danger you're putting yourself in until you crash, and then you already have the fear. So I think it should really be like in other sports that you learn skills first and then increase the difficulty. But since there's this misconception that people think you'll just learn by riding, that's why so many
Yeah.
people crash. And that is what I've been really trying to bring out there in the world, also with my remote coaching courses and with long term coaching. I don't do 1 day skills clinics at all because I don't think they're really helpful. No one learns a language in a day. And why do you think we learn mountain biking in a day? I just
That's
always
true.
work long term with my clients. So a great mountain biker is someone, as I said, who will have their bike under control. So now the question is, how do you get your bike under control?
Yeah.
Well, the answer is you need to build movement patterns first. And to build movement patterns, you need to practice these over and over in a controlled environment where there's no danger of crashing because your brain cannot learn with fear. It doesn't work. That's neuroscience. So you practice these movement patterns, you get them corrected, ideally with a coach, or you can correct them with a video analysis, checking yourself, and then you start increasing the difficulty of the trails. And that's how you can progress safely. And that's why so many riders age 60, 70, 80 plus work with me because they know, okay, this is like a minimal risk approach. And I have so many
Wow.
riders that haven't crashed in many years, although now they are riding double black trails safely. So to come back to your question, I think a great mountain biker is someone A, who always has their bike under control, and two, who really knows their limits because they've progressed step by step and then knows, okay, now if I am not in control, these are the skills I'm missing. And then who works on these again in a safe environment and then starts taking them to harder trails and not the other way around.
That is that is so astute and so on point because last year I was on a brand new bike and I got to that point, I'm not going to lie. I was like, "Oh, I'm good. I've had coaching and I think it's important to even learn the basics, right? I've been riding for years and I'd never had coaching, and about 4 years ago I finally had like a basic one-on-one skills coach with the great folks over at the Sedona Mountain Bike Academy. And it was great. So then I'm like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm good." You know, I get caught up in the Women's Mountain Bike Network. I'm demoing bikes. I'm always on a different bike, which makes it challenging to even develop proper skill because I'm always reviewing different bikes. So then I got a personal bike around this time last year, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to Sedona. It's my favorite place to ride in the world, and I'm going to try and practice these skills. And on this new bike came with brand new tires that I had never ridden before. It was Continental tires. I'd never ridden Continental tires, but I've heard nothing but good things. So I'm like, what could go wrong, right? I crashed, Roxy, twice on trails that I was very familiar with, and blue trails, right? And I know it doesn't, you know, the level of the trail doesn't matter. If you don't have the skill, you're not going to, you know, ride well. So I crashed twice, and here I am, like, these stupid tires. I washed out, like, I'm totally, like, not even self-evaluating that it's me and it's not the bike or the tires. And I had to self-reflect, and I was like, oh, crap. You know, I sent a video to my friend Amaranth, who's the coach for Sedona Mountain Bike Academy, and I'm like, what do you think I'm doing wrong? And she calls me, and she's like, first of all, your body is all the way back. You're not centered. So she went through it with me, and it was things that I hadn't thought about because I arrogantly thought, oh, I'm good. I'm a good rider. I don't need this. So you're right. Like, knowing your limit, getting the proper coaching. And ever since that conversation with her about 9 months ago, every time I'm on a trail, regardless of the bike, I talk to myself. So I watched a video of me riding to do a review on a bike, and I'm talking to myself going, slow and controlled, modulate your brakes, like like I'm out loud saying these things. And that's what's helped me, is to
Great.
check myself so I don't crash and go over the bars and injure myself. Right. So
Yeah.
everything you're saying resonates so much. And if you're listening to this, you have to check yourself and your riding. Like, e-bikers nowadays get a really bad reputation because they just get on the bike, they pedal, and they don't, some people say they don't have the skill. So what you're saying resonates immediately with that as well. And going into that is something that ties into building fear and confidence on a bike, and like, not building on fear, building confidence and overcoming the fear that we have on a mountain bike. Crashing is a big part of it. As we're saying, training is, and coaching and practicing is a huge part of overcoming that fear. But what is your go-to strategy to help people push past that fear and gain confidence on a bike?
Yeah. Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm also a psychological counselor, and I'm a
Yes.
graduate mental trainer and a neuromental trainer, which is mental training based on neuroscience. And so I can actually even work with people with depression, anxiety disorders. So I can go
Wow.
much deeper if this is necessary. So, first thing I think, and that's also, it can get really dangerous if someone is working with someone on fears or overcome fears and they're not really qualified. And that is the reason why I took all these qualifications, because one day I was coaching, and the lady broke down in the coaching section, and I was like, okay, wow, this is definitely beyond my level. How can I prevent this from happening again? And
Yeah.
how can I help a person when this happens? Because she was taken back to a traumatic event in the past. And this can always happen when you're working with fears, always. Um, so that's the first thing that I really noticed as a coach is important. The other
Mm-hmm.
thing is that fear is not a stop sign. Fear is actually a billboard saying this way. And fear is just a sign that you care. So fear is a sign that you care about yourself. And fear is a sign that you're sensing something is threatening you. And we need to take this fear as this billboard and go towards it and really say, okay, which way is it really pointing me towards? And then we need to work, as I said, with the fear, not against it. So that's the thing that most people are like, okay, I have this fear, I want it to go away. But I always like to imagine it like, you know, like a thorn on a bush when
Yeah.
you're caught with your beautiful new little jersey and you're caught in it and you pull it, you're just going to ruin your jersey. But if you walk towards that bush and take time to take those thorns out of it, and then you can walk away and your beautiful jersey is untouched. And that's what people do when fear. They're caught and they're like, and they ruin all their jerseys.
Dang.
So that's the thing. First of all, going towards the fear, you need to lean into the fear and say, okay, what is it actually telling me? What am I really scared of? And then that we have this misconception that fear will just go away like that. It will just disappear. It can, of course, I do have techniques as a fear coach and a phobia coach that can help almost immediately. But With mountain biking, often the fear is a grounded fear. So it's a legitimate fear because your body and your subconscious is sensing you don't really have the skill. So I'm always very careful when applying these techniques when I know that when I'm not 100% sure that it's a mental block.
Right.
Because let me just share the difference. Like the mental block is you have the fear, you're totally scared, but there's no reason at all. So you have the
Mm-hmm.
skills, you have the control, you're still scared. And the other one, the legitimate fear, is you're fearful and your subconscious mind and your body are sensing, okay, I'm not really in control. Of course, you can push past that fear, but you're going to get hurt sooner or later. So I always,
Right.
when I'm working with my clients on fear, it's always a combination of both the mental work and the skills work, because in about 90% of the cases, it is the skills that are actually the reason why the person is fearful. And then it's about really acknowledging that confidence is not waiting for you at some point, but that confidence is built again, step by step. Every
Wow.
time you really working on those skills, working with your mindset, analyzing it, improving, gaining control, that's when you build confidence way beyond mountain biking, because you notice you start to trust yourself. You start to really know, is this my limit or not? And I think true confidence is actually not riding a section and being okay with it and not having that urge to say, I have to ride it. That is
I
true
am
confidence.
I'm gonna use that now to make myself feel better when I don't want to ride something that I'm not I'm gonna be like Roxy told me that it's okay to
Yeah,
do, and you're
because
right.
it's okay if there's something off with that section, like you really want to ride it. I'm just imagining, or this happened to me a lot, and it still happens to me nowadays. But I'm just so grateful that I've been through this process to know there are some days where I won't ride a section that I've ridden 10 times, but I just something about it feels off. Maybe I'm hungry, maybe I'm tired, I haven't slept well, I haven't eaten well, and I come to that section. I'm like, no, today is not the day. And I used to really beat myself up for that. I used to be like, you've ridden it 10 times, you're such a pussy, why are you doing this? Negative self-talk. And then I said, no, wait, I have this fear. I'm going to lean into it. What is it about? So I looked into it and said, okay, today you're tired. You're not concentrated. You're not going to ride it. It would be super stupid of you to do it. And nowadays I'm okay. I will walk down and say, there's another day. And that's when I stopped for a moment and say, wow, I've never done this like 2 years ago. And that's when I noticed this is confidence. Confidence isn't pep talking myself up there, riding it and then crashing. That's not confidence. Confidence is pushing and being okay with it. And
Yeah.
that's the first thing. Like really knowing your limits is so much more confident than just overconfidently riding something. And then of
You,
course there's yeah, sorry.
no, go ahead because that's how people crash. That's how accidents happen, right?
Exactly. So we always need to differentiate between confidence and overconfidence. And then of course there are people, or I've also been there, that actually have the skills, but they don't feel confident enough because of many other reasons. And again, there it's about what really helps many clients and myself is chunking the whole section. So for example, I look at a steep section on Highline and I will say, okay, no, I'm terrified writing this. And then I will say, okay, why? Again, take the fear as a billboard. Why am I scared of writing this? I'm scared that my front wheel will wash out there. Okay, then let's look at that. Why are you scared of that? Has this happened to you? How can you avoid it? Do you have the skills? Have you practiced this often enough to avoid that? And if the answer is yes, I have the skills, then you'll also feel, okay, the fear is probably already dissipating. It's already reducing. Then I look at the next section. Okay, I'm fearful there because I know that if something happens, then there's like a cliff down there. Okay, but how big is the chance that I will lose control of my speed? Can I modulate the brakes? Can I stay in control? And then again, you will see, oh, okay, I haven't done that often enough. Well, then it's a legitimate fear. I'll go practice that, come back and ride it. And again, you're confident about yourself. You're taking care of yourself. And confidence is not just saying yes and riding that no matter how. Confidence is really knowing your limits and then practicing that and then coming back and doing it or not doing it and being okay with it. But whatever choice you take, it's about saying yes to yourself and not just yes to something because you think you have to do that.
That's so powerful, that quote that you just said, saying yes to yourself and not yes because you feel like you have to, or you're peer pressured into it, or because someone else is doing it. Like, that's incredible because you're right. You have to take care of yourself first. What
Yeah.
happens if you crash and you have a family and you have to work the next day and you have to provide for someone like that? Oh my God, I just got the chills. That's such incredible advice. That's incredible advice because my next question to you was, are there any mental drills or exercises that help riders feel more in control of the bike? And you just touched on that. Like you
Yeah,
have to
there definitely are.
compartmentalize that.
Yeah. The first thing is, as I said, chunking down the section and then looking at if you have that plan A really in control. The second one is analyzing it and saying, do I have a plan B? For example, if I notice in between I'm not going to be able to ride the whole section, how can I get off my bike safely? And then,
Yeah.
for example, being able to dismount safely. And then also having practiced that enough, because that is this misconception. And I think it's, as I said before, I don't give single day skills clinics because that's not how we learn, not as adults. It's not how our brain works. It's not how our body works. It's just like going to the gym once and saying, where's my biceps? My God, I went, you see, I've done a few curls. And that's, with mountain biking, people do that though. They go to a 1 day skills clinic and they say, oh, I'm going to apply it to the trail. Yeah. You went to 1 hour Spanish lesson, you're going to fly to Spain and you're going to speak Spanish perfectly? No, it's not the way it works. And that's why as I said, like 8 years ago, I started working only long term with my clients. So I don't do 1 day, 2 day skills clinic. I always do at least 5 days and always followed up with months of
Yeah.
remote coaching, because that's where like the real magic happens. And then practicing, like really practicing these things. Once you've chunked them down, practicing them individually in a safe environment before expecting them to work there where you're fearful. And I think that's why mountain biking is so dangerous, because people, they
Yeah.
think, oh, I'm just going to apply this to the trail. Oh, wow, I just ran it, like rode into a tree. Of course you did. Like
Yeah.
if it doesn't work off the trail, how is it going to work on the trail?
Dang. Roxy, this is amazing. Like, I'm kind of going off to some of the other questions I had for you because I wanted to ask you then, with this mindset and guidance and coaching, do you often get folks asking you if it's better for them to start learning on a regular bike, an acoustic, analog, whatever people call it, or an e-bike? Because that's always something I hear from women like, oh, the e-bikes are too heavy. I don't think I'd be confident enough. And I have seen a few of your videos discussing that. And you ride an e-bike well, and you're a shorter rider. And so, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Say I'm coming to you, I have really good skill, but I'm intimidated by an e-bike. Like, what would you say to me? Yes, you can do it, or no, or what's the barrier that like is stopping women from going onto an e-bike?
Well, the first thing is I have both. Actually, I have all three. So I have a normal analog bike. I have a
Yeah.
light EMTB, which is only about 16 kilograms. So like an enduro bike a few years ago.
Yeah, like
And
38 pounds or something like
yeah,
that. Yeah.
exactly. And I have a full power e-bike, which is really heavy. It's not really heavy, but it's normal for an e-bike. And it is heavy because it's half of my body weight. It's like 24 kilograms.
Wow.
And I regularly practice with all of them in order to be able to give my clients good use. And some skills are definitely harder with an e-bike, but some skills are also easier. And I always give the advice, first off, practice with the bike that you will be riding most of the time, because you need to feel comfortable on that bike. So if you want to be riding an e-bike, practice with the e-bike. And if you don't want to be riding with an e-bike, then practice on the analog bike. And we can learn all the skills on an e-bike as well. It will just generally, if it's strength-based maneuvers, like for example, bunny hops or nose-to turns or stuff, it will be harder on an e-bike. It is possible generally to some extent, but of course, for example, bunny hop height will be limited and will require
Mm-hmm.
even more practice and even more precision, even better timing, and even more strength. And that's actually, I'm just publishing a video about that tomorrow, actually. Like
Oh,
one of
nice.
one of the biggest misconceptions is that, I'm sure you've heard that, like guys are like, oh, it's easy, just pull up the bike, and it doesn't work for us. Of course it doesn't, because we have anatomically, physically, biomechanically, we have so many disadvantages in comparison to men. And of
Yes.
course, these disadvantages are even higher on an e-bike. So of course, if my bike weighs half of my body weight, think about it. It's like a 200-pound guy on a 100-pound bike. I'm sure
Yeah.
he wouldn't bunny hop that. He can't tell me he would. And that's why these are the things we need to take into account. But to come back to your question, practice on a bike that you will ride most of the time, but practice. Take your time, practice the drills. I have a home training course for the fundamentals that has been game changing for many, because you can just take your time, practice right on your doorstep, or put in the reps that you need to build the skills, because we build skills just like we build a muscle over
Yeah.
time. And that's
Yeah.
why when people are fearful out on the trails, like as I said, 90% of the time or even more, it's because they don't have the skills, because they haven't put in the reps in a safe environment, built those movement patterns, and then taken them to the trails. They take it to the trail way too fast and then expect them to magically work there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was able to, surprisingly, I had an e-bike for 6 months that I was riding because I was reviewing it, and it was a full power, but it was only 19 kilos. So that was a game changer for me because I felt more confident, and I was actually able to bunny hop that thing over a snake, and I was very proud of myself because I
Yeah,
didn't
way to
think I could
go.
bunny hop. I didn't think I could bunny hop on that bike at all. But when you see something coming at you, like, that was instinctual for me. It was completely like pup lift. What? There's
Yeah,
that
good for the
snake.
snake.
Well, I didn't want to hurt it. I actually
Exactly. Yeah, I bet the snake is like on snake Instagram. They're like, she's in
here's this camera version. No, because I have run over a rattlesnake before, and I think I did injure it because I saw it last minute, and I did go back to see if the snake was okay, but I couldn't see it, so I think it was all right. I don't know. That
Hopefully,
is
definitely. You
anyway.
wouldn't.
Bunny hopping on e-bikes is fun
Yeah,
if you have the skill for it.
yeah,
But
yes,
that makes
definitely.
total sense because it's much heavier bike. It's much heavier to physically maneuver all of that, to do all those skills on there. Curious, what what's your take on using an e-bike, let's just say a lightweight e-bike, on uphill technical terrain, let's say highline, for example? Like,
Hmm.
do you think that bike would be better than an analog on that trail? Do you think an e-bike would be better? And why?
Yeah, definitely. I'm a huge fan of e-bikes, and a lot of people say they make you lazy, and I don't feel so at all. For
Yeah.
me, it has opened up such a huge horizon of new possibilities, and I will train with an e-bike, actually deliberately train with an e-bike often, because for one thing, I can keep my heart rate in a zone, and I can, as you said,
Yes.
ride technical trails uphill that I never imagined I could, because at some point your strength, especially as a woman, will not be enough to keep riding that super techy long climb and do many of them. So that's the amazing thing about e-bikes. It opens up new possibilities. And the next thing why I use it a lot is I can ride these sections faster. So I'm also training my anticipation and my vision and my line choice. So that's something that also
Ooh.
then helps me for the downhills. And that's why I
Yeah.
use e-bikes specifically to improve both my e-bike and my non-e-bike riding. But I couldn't do that on a non-e-bike, because at some point I wouldn't have the strength anymore.
That's
So that's
such a
why,
good
yeah,
point.
that's why I really love e-bikes. And I'm always shocked about the hate you sometimes get for e-bikes, because it's just another type of riding. It's
Yeah.
not, I wouldn't say it's a replacement. So if someone told me you can just own one bike, I would probably even choose the analog, because I like the lightness of it and the springiness and everything.
Yeah.
But having the possibility to ride both is amazing, because just what I learn on the e-bike, it transfers to my normal bike so well. And also because of the weight, I can train my skills so much more. I can add, it's like strength training and timing training at once, that then transfers to my normal bike again. And that's
Yeah.
why for Highline, I think It's actually perfect. If I had the choice, I would do Highline definitely with an e-bike. Then, like, I would prefer doing it with an e-bike than with a normal bike.
Yeah, I just feel like it takes a little different skill set for technical on an e-bike personally, and you can correct me, give me your take on this, because I feel like um the footwork is a little bit different with an e-bike than for an analog bike, especially in a trail like Highline, for reference, for example, where you have some chunk you have to really kind of get over, like some what, 1 foot, 2 foot rocks you have to get over. So the footwork would be very different, right? As you're trying to modulate that to get over it. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it is definitely different, but also it has advantages that the analog bike wouldn't have. So it makes things easier in a lot of things because you can just take in a little bit more speed.
Mm-hmm.
However, it is different because since you will be doing them at more speed, you can also use a different technique to when you're doing it on the analog. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I I freaking love e-bikes. I think they're amazing. And for me, it really came into fruition because I have a neck injury. And so my doctor told me you cannot ride your bike longer than 2 hours. And if you're doing parks, you have to wear the lightest helmet you can find, because we're always like this, right? We're looking ahead. So your neck is in a certain position and you're standing up. And so e-bikes, like the fact that I can do more laps and still train and still practice has been key. So like you, I'm not sure why people have so much hate. It's like, just get over it. People are on bikes. That's what matters, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with that said, I have horrible habit. Let's take me as your case sample here. I really have the bad habit of not positioning myself sometimes on steep centrally on my bike to where I have chin over stem, I'm controlled, right? I tend to go back a little bit, which is why I think I wash out in the front, because I'm not correctly centered. How do you help riders like me break that habit and kind of replace that with solid technique?
hmm Okay. So the first, and this also comes back to a question you asked me before that I just noticed that I haven't really answered completely yet.
That's
You
okay.
asked me about like which drills I would suggest to build confidence and
Yeah.
control. And this ties in really well with your question right now, because the first thing is, and that's like that I have to be honest, I never use the chin over stem because I think it's super
Oh,
dangerous. And I'm going to tell
really?
you why
Okay.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tell me.
So I never use any part of the bike as a reference because your bike is going to be moving beneath you. So your body is meant to be stable and your bike is going to move. So if I'm showing your body with my fingers right now, and
Mm-hmm.
this is the bike is
Mm-hmm.
going to be moving according to the terrain and your body's going to stay stable. So now, if you take chin over stem and you look at yourself in the flat, your chin will be exactly over the stem. But now, when you're riding steep downhill, the bike will tilt forward beneath you. Where's the chin and the stem going to be? They're going to be farther apart, right? And if
Right.
you take that reference point and say, okay, chin over stem, you're probably going to be too far forward in the steep. And that's why I never take a reference point of the bike because it changes according to the angulation of the bike it is in. And
Mm-hmm.
another thing is it changes according to the geometry of the bike. Like my race cross country bike is longer. I never have chin over stem. And on my e-bike, which is much shorter, I'll be much more chin over stem. So having that reference point, if I use the same chin over stem position for both bikes, I would be completely off on one bike. And that's why I never use references of body to
Yeah.
bike. Does that make sense?
100% that makes sense. A hundred
Um,
percent.
and actually, I also have a video of about chin over stem where I show that on a roll down. So what I use
You have
instead is
everything, Roxy. You have everything, girl. Sorry, go
so
ahead.
what I use instead is I use a feeling that how I will work with my clients to hold them on a bike on a static hold and allow them to feel where their body should be in which steepness. And it's actually really easy. You need to be fully weighted in your feet with no weight in your palms, so you're not leaning against your handlebars and you're not hanging off them. And if you do that, if you really feel into your hands and say, okay, my handlebar is giving me the feedback. If I'm weighted in my hands, I'm too far forward. If I'm hanging off my three fingers, like this is the handlebar, these are the three fingers. If I'm hanging off these fingers, I'm too far rearward. That's it. That's
Ah,
all you need to feel. Of course, when you're riding downhill and you're braking,
my mind
it's
was just
gonna
blown
be yeah,
right now.
mind blown. And and this also ties back into something you said right at the beginning when you said even learning the basics. Like the basics are the most important thing with mountain
Yes.
biking because they're the foundation of everything. And when I work with riders of all levels, even the pros I've worked or I am working with, we will work on basics, and that is body positioning like 2 to 3 times a week. And these are pro level riders. So if I'm working with body positioning with pro level riders, we probably in an amateur level may need this as well, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And that's why like body positioning is the most misunderstood principle out there. And this also always comes back to this 1 day skills clinic. Of course, you don't want to overcomplicate it in like 1 or 2 days, but really refining that body positioning is the game changer out there.
Yeah.
So what you can do is first ride in the flat and really feel that. Feel 100% weighted through your feet, 50% on your left foot, 50 on your right foot, and no weight in your hands. Like really, literally no weight in your hands. You don't need the handlebar. You could let go of the handlebar. You still want to grip the grips. So if this is the grip, you're gripping them, but you're not leaning on and you're not hanging off them. And you want to feel that. And then, okay, where am I positioned in the bike? Your chin will be over the stem in the flat. And then you look for something that's like flat and then goes downhill and goes back to flat. And you just want to maintain that heavy feet, light hands, and really that heavy feet, no weight in your hands. You want to maintain that. And then you'll notice that the bike will move away from you down into that downhill, and your chin will move away from the stem. But you're not actively moving backwards, you're just allowing the bike to move forward. And if you check on my Instagram, I just like 2 weeks ago, I posted body position debunked actually, where you can really see the bike moving and the body staying stable. And
Yeah.
if you look at that, I'm sure you will now see my chin is not over my stem when I'm running downhill, and
And
my
it's
chin is way in front of my stem when I'm riding uphill.
Yeah, see, running uphill, I imagined you have to get off and you have to pull yourself forward and get that momentum. Like that, I understood. The chin over stem was downhill. But I remember watching that video. You're going down on was it like a creek bed? It was like rocks or
Yes.
something, and you went back up. I remember watching that video, and I thought that. I swear to God, I thought that. I was like, I might be missing something because I've always heard heavy feet, light hands. I've always heard that,
Yes.
right? But until now, you just explained it, what that means. I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing. People will be, I heard that. Okay, I know what that means. And then we just skim past that information, although that is like the most important, the most foundational thing when you're mountain biking is heavy feet, light hands, and literally your body weight is on your legs and not in your handlebar. And the reason is simple. Your cranks are the only thing that can move freely on the bike. So if you're planted on your cranks, then the bike can move around those cranks and the body can stay stable, right? Like that is, yes, exactly. Like that is your stable ground, those crank arms. And when you're leaning on the handlebar, the bike moves forward, the body's going to move forward, right? And when you're
Yeah.
hanging off the handlebar, the bike moves forward, it's going to pull you. And that's when you get into that the bike is riding you
Yeah.
versus you're planted on your feet and the bike is moving and the body is stable. It's only possible, like physically, if you're weighted through the feet, like fully
Yeah.
weighted through the feet.
That's
Yeah.
amazing, Roxy. Like seriously, like my mind is just blown right now because I've heard that from folks, but I've never had someone explain it in that detail, that section that you're talking about for real. Like a friend of mine is a racist, Sierra. She works for us now. She's freaking amazing. She's a former professional downhill racer. And when I rode with her, I just watched. I followed her line. I went behind her and completely different style. It blew my mind. It was the first time I've actually ridden with someone who has been riding. She's been riding since she was 10 years old. She's been racing since she was 10 years old. And I could see that in action, the light hands. heavy feet. And she told me that one time. She's like, you need to position your feet like this and really brace it. And she's a great teacher too. She taught me how to do up and down switchbacks. So I give her full credit for that. But watching someone like her, I understood what you just told me, which is the body
Mm-hmm.
positioning. She was riding the bike. Like her body was so loose and how she was right. I was just so impressed. And now it all clicks. You're watching someone do it and someone explains it to you as well. And you're like, oh, that's how that person did that. That's how
Yeah.
they're executing that skill. That's
Yeah, that is
incredible.
exactly why like the best riders are often not good coaches because they don't even think about it. For them, it's like so foundational and so ingrained. They don't even think that for someone else it's not natural. So the better the rider is, the harder it is for them to become a good coach because they don't even feel, they don't even know that, they don't have that conscious understanding of why and what they're doing.
Yeah.
That.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's why she like the better she is, and I'm sure she is a great coach and a great rider. The better she is at these things, the harder it is for her to break it down for someone who doesn't have that body intelligence.
Yeah. No, she broke it down for me in a way, at least when she was teaching me going up switchbacks on an e-bike. And I didn't want to do it. I was like, no, I can't do it. Like, it's too heavy. And she's like, I just watched you go down these tight switchbacks. You can come up them. So I was like, okay. She guided me through it. She's like, look up, look ahead, point your bike, make sure your cranks are there. Don't be too heavy on your hands. Like she did the same thing going up. So yeah, it really is life-changing when you understand how the bike
It
works
definitely
and where
is.
you need to
Yeah.
position yourself.
Yeah,
So
definitely. And that's why like the fundamentals course that I have online, that like so many advanced riders have taken it and said, "Oh wow, I finally understand why I went over the handlebars there. I finally understood like
yeah.
the body positioning because those tiny details are what have the huge effects down the line." And that's why I think that most people are really looking over these fundamentals or not acknowledging their importance.
Yeah, 100%. So would you say that the fundamentals is how a rider would break bad habits and then,
Yes.
instill the solid technique? It's just fundamentals.
100%. So I really say like fundamentals over fads over and over again is what makes an expert writer.
I love
Always
that.
that way.
So if
It
you're
is.
listening to
And
these folks, go practice your fundamentals right now. Get on your bike and go practice. Well, after you listen to this
yeah.
podcast, go and
Yeah.
go watch
No,
some of
that's why
Roxy's videos.
I have a fundamentals course and I've deliberately made it super, super affordable because I wanted people to start with that course. It's like way less than a single day clinic, although it has drills for like probably 4 months. And people can literally do them in front of their doorstep, and it even includes
Yeah.
personal feedback from me. So that fundamentals course is has all everything you'd learn in a single day clinic plus way more and drills for like months. And that is the game changing thing because once
Yeah.
we've understood that, once we've felt that as you said, that is when you write something, you write down a steep descent and you're like, wow, like for the first time, I haven't felt that my bike is pulling me or I'm getting stuck. And I can, for the first time, feel that I am in control of this bike. And that is like
Yeah.
the magic feeling.
Yeah, 100%. It is a great feeling when you feel like that. So we've been talking a lot about skills and all the amazing things you need to do for it and everything that you offer. But I kind of wanted to switch gears a little bit because we're in a very male dominated industry. And I've unfortunately seen some trolls on your YouTube be very rude. And I don't understand why people go out of their way to criticize someone when they probably don't even know what the hell they're talking about. So, with that said, what is it that you feel we still need to work on? I know this is a loaded question, but what is it that you feel we still need to work on to support women riders in this industry?
Oh, lots.
Yeah, right? That like where do you
Yeah.
start? Here's a list.
Yeah.
What
So
comes to mind right now
yeah,
for you?
no. The first thing is, just as I said when we started, it's super important. The work you are doing is so important and super inspiring because we need to get more women out there in the first place. And it's also one reason why I actually started Instagram and YouTube. Although I was like, I don't want to be doing this. Is it really social media? And now I'm just grateful that I did because I know I'm inspiring more women to find their confidence, find their type of riding, and actually own their type of riding, to say, okay, for me, mountain biking is this, and it doesn't have to be doing big drops. It doesn't have to be, it can be, but it doesn't have to be. So inspiring women to do all type of mountain biking. And I think what the industry needs to do is, for one thing, change the marketing away from like this shred, huck and pray, you're only a mountain biker if you do a rampage. Yes, that's also inspiring, and it's also inspiring that women are doing that now, absolutely, but it's not the only type of mountain biking. And I think the image of mountain biking really needs to change, that mountain biking is so much more, and that mountain biking can do so much for your mental health. It can do so much for your body at even like after a specific age, and that for us women, it doesn't have to be that daredevil sport. It can also be having a fun ride with friends and focusing on that growth and putting the growth first, like saying, go out, build your skills, build your confidence, have a good time, own your ride, and lean into that growth of it. That really is part of mountain biking. And don't think you need to prove to the world or to anything that you are a real mountain biker. I think that's one
Exactly.
of the biggest things, definitely. And the next thing is also that men start to acknowledge, or generally the industry starts to acknowledge, that for us women, it is harder. We don't have the muscles to muscle it up. The bike is comparatively much heavier for us than it is for men. And we don't have the leverage because we're shorter usually. So we don't have the quick strength. This is physics and science. It's not that we're inventing it, not that we're making excuses. It is actually harder for us to learn many skills. And of course, also because we women usually don't play sports as much as men do when they're young, we don't have the same coordination, the same basis to learn skills. So we will learn slower. Some skills will never be as amazing. Like, no way I will be able to bunny hop over a meter high. That is, I think, about 4 feet high. It
Yeah.
won't work with my height. So that people stop comparing women and men and expecting women to do or perform exactly the same way. That is something
Interesting.
that is, I get a lot. Like, so many people like, that was not impressive at all. And I'm like, yeah, who are you comparing that to? Aaron Gwynn? Like, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. Yeah. But not only that, like I think some people, so for Rampage, for example, there was a lot of trolls saying, well, the women were underwhelming and they didn't do this and they didn't do that. And I don't think that's necessarily a skill thing because they're highly skilled riders. But also to think about that Robin did a backflip going down a steep chute in 60 feet. Like she landed 60 feet doing a backflip. So in 2001, 2002, the men weren't at the same skill level that the women are
Yeah.
today. So it takes some education as well on that, as well as what you're saying that the industry needs to acknowledge the differences between the
Yeah.
women and men and some of the
And
and
that's, as I said, the thing is, like, alone comparing women to men is just so, it's, I don't know the English word, but it doesn't make sense because if you look at like the fastest woman, I think on Enduro World Series, she had a time that if you take the time and put it among the men, she would have been second last among the male racers. And still,
mhm
she's the fastest woman of the world because we
mhm
have a different physique. We have different
yeah
strength. And of course, we will always be limited in this. So, of course, we will never be able to perform exactly as amazingly as men when you just try to compare these things. It's like a monkey taking a fish out of the water and saying, "You're wrong, you're drowning, boy. I'm going to put you where you belong," and puts him on, you put him
That's
on a
funny.
tree, and it's like, "Oh wow, why is he dying?" That's
Yeah.
something what men are trying to do with men, and I think that's the big problem.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yesterday for Hardline, Redwood Hardline was on last night, and Gracie was the first woman to again do the entire thing. And what I thought was super cool is that out of the I don't know how many racers there were for their qualifying times, she beat out like 4 or 5 of the men on her time. And that was really cool to see. And when you see her racing yesterday, she's a petite short, skinny, athletic build woman. It's very different than the 6'2" G
Yeah.
Atherton who was going down the trail.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I mean, I have so many other questions for you. I think we're going to need to do like a part two at some point. Are you coming to the United States at any point soon that we could maybe do something together?
That would be amazing, but unfortunately, it isn't planned, especially now with Trump and everything. It's getting even harder. So,
Yeah, it
uh,
is.
yeah, not probably not next year, and I don't think the year after. We'll see when hopefully one day I can come again. Because the problem is we really cannot work there with immigration and stuff. So I would
Yeah.
have to come just for a holiday, and with everything becoming so super expensive in the US, it's hard for
Yeah, no, I completely understand. And I know where you're coming from. I did not vote for that person. So I'm one of those people that's very um sad at the way things are turning out. But I have hope. We have hope. Without hope, we can't. We're just going to get into a deep depression, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, we definitely need hope.
So we at the end of every podcast here, we do something super fun. I ask one specific question and then we do some rapid fire questions at the end. You can't think about it. You just have to say the first thing that comes to your head. But first, I wanted to ask you, you've been doing this for a long time, but when you started, what was the best, worst advice someone had given you? So it's like the advice is so bad that it's the one that's at the top of your list. Can you think of something? I mean, lean
Yeah,
back is always the one that always comes to mind for me, but
yeah. Well, definitely for me, it was probably you have to ride clipped and to be a real mountain biker.
what?
Yeah, yeah. So that was,
No.
it took me like 3 or 4 years to unlearn the bad habits that I learned just by riding clipped in because I thought I had to.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
I don't like riding clip. That scares the shit out of me.
Actually, like nowadays, I ride clipped in sometimes,
Yeah.
because when I started training pro cross country riders, of course I had to start because I need to again see how it feels for them. So I
Yeah.
do ride clipped in on my cross country bike, and I started enjoying it because it really makes so many things easier. So
Yeah.
I started to love them, but I still ride flats on like most of my bikes because, as I said, it makes things harder. So of course I'm improving my skills by riding flats.
Yeah,
But
that's
it's just
true.
so funny because when that person back then said it, and a lot of guys said that you have to ride and to become a real mountain biker. So I did it. Of course, I was insecure, so I did it, and I just learned so many bad things that it took me ages to unlearn afterwards. So whatever, if you're one of these people, don't ride club then because you think you have to.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Understood. I agree. I agree with everything that you said because I think you're awesome. Okay. So here's the rapid fire questions.
I'm
Are
nervous
you
now.
ready?
I
This
don't
kind of
know.
goes to what we just talked about. Okay.
Yes,
Clips
I'm
or
ready.
flats?
Flat,
Desert or mountain?
mountain,
Hardtail or full suspension?
full suspension,
E-bike or analog?
analog.
Your biggest mountain bike pet peeve?
What's that?
Like something that annoys you about mountain biking?
Okay. The focus on stunts.
Ooh, interesting. The focus on stunts. We'll elaborate on that in a second. If you could only ride one type of terrain forever, which would it be?
Rocky Gnar.
Rocky Nar. Steep or just Rocky
Yes.
Nar in general? Steep
Steep,
Rocky Nar
steep, rocky, loose Gnar with a view.
with a view. One thing you always carry on a bike ride.
A pump?
Sure. Okay. Pump. And
Does that
your
count?
favorite trail. It counts. What's the favorite trail you've ever ridden? I know
Probably
this is a
my,
tough one.
yeah, but honestly, my home trail. yeah, like since we moved here to the Costa Blanca in Spain, I have this one trail that I ride often in the evening, and like it has everything. Like it has these punchy climbs, it has these technical downhills, it has the views, it has the chunkiness, and
Yeah.
I'm always by myself. So perfect.
Amazing. I love that so much. I love that so much. Thank you, Roxy, so much for being on our podcast and chatting with us. For all of you listening, be sure to check out Roxy's website, her YouTube, her Instagram. I'm going to link everything below. Like Roxy was saying, she does coaching remotely, but also in person. She has a lot of mental health training that she helps riders overcome. And so it's not just a mountain biking skill thing. She's a very well all-rounded teacher and coach and amazing human. And I'm so glad that you took the time to talk with us today.
Thank you. And I also have a free course for the track stand that everyone can start at home.
Yes, that was
Thank
going to
you
be
for
my
having
other
me.
question. Do you have something coming up that you want folks to know about aside from that?
Yes, I have a Skill Up Challenge. That is a 6 week live online program starting on the 29th of March. That is a unique combination of many things that I have never done before, but I know it will be so helpful. It's a combination of coordination, strength training, skills training, and mindset work with live
Wow.
webinars and home like weekly exercises. And I know it's going to be super, super helpful because we did a similar one last year and we've like completely revamped it and improved it this year. So I know it's going to be super, super helpful.
Amazing. Looking forward to it. That's going to be great. I might even sign up for that. My feet will be good for that at that time. But thank you again, Roxy. I appreciate you. Have a great night. I know it's late over there in Spain, and we'll catch you soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks for everything you do. Like, seriously.
You're the best. Thank you so much.